Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 12 of season 2 of the Apothecary Diaries, and I have many thoughts. I don't know if this is going to be the end of the first cour or if it's going to carry on into episode 13. I don't know. What I do know is that I'm very excited because I am able to see this episode before I go on my trip. The team I coach, we're going to nationals at the end of this coming week, and I don't think I'm going to be able to see episode 13. So next week, I talk about it on the April update video. So if you've not seen the April update video, it's on my channel, and I'll go into it in more detail in that video. But next week, I will have something to replace episode 13 for the time being, since I'll be out of town. And then the following week, we'll pick back up, and my plans are to do episode 13 the following Wednesday after that, and then episode 14 I'll make up over the weekend so that we can get back on track with episode 15 the next week. So that's my plan. I talk about it in the update video, but I'm so glad I get to see this episode before I go. I'm so glad. I was like, oh no. So we do have several comments I want to talk about before we dive into this episode, but last week I feel bad for Jinshi because Jinshi is in a foreign country trying to mask the fact that he's both Jinshi and the Emperor's brother. He hasn't been able to tell Maomao about all of this. He's been trying to tell her and everything keeps getting in the way. And then he's being sexually aroused, possibly by the end of this last episode. I mean, the writing was on the wall, but we'll see if that has any bears any fruit this episode. We'll see what happens. Oh, I've been excited. I have been staying off of social media all week because I was like, no, I am not going to get spoiled. I'm going to enjoy this episode and see where it takes us. But with that being said, thank you all for the comments and the kind words. I do want to talk about, I've got 2 comments from episode 10. I've got one from episode 11 and one that kind of ties in episode 11 that we're going to use before we dive into this. So, Algumalgum says for episode 10, the anime didn't draw much attention to it, only flashing to it very briefly. But in episode 10, when the wife was looking for the priest in Shisui's story, you can see that her shadow is that of an insect. I don't know. There is a lot of bug symbolism around Shisui. And I've talked about how Lolan kind of has the same like bug motif in some of her jewelry that she has brought with her, you know, not suspicious at all. But I don't know what the whole purpose of, because Shisui's whole thing is she catches bugs. She catches insects. So I don't know if the fact that her shadow was the insect was just her like, you know, catching the bugs or whatever, or if it's the fact that is she like a praying mantis and she hunts people down. Is there more to it? If she is like a praying mantis and she is also being Lolan at the same time as Shisui, Emperor, I'd be watching my back. Because if Shisui is Lolan, she is terrifying. And I'm very excited to see what they're going to do with the insect motif with Shisui. If there's a reason she catches the bugs, if that ties metaphorically into something bigger, we're going to see. And the fact that it was a priest in the story, like what does that have to do with things? I don't want to get too far into my tinfoil hat theories because if I'm wrong, I've wasted a lot of your time in going into this theorizing. But I want to see what the show is going to give me in terms of the insect motif with Shisui and what that all refers to. Because like Maomao has a poison motif, right? She has a poison motif. Maomao does. It's on her skin, everything. I'm curious about Shisui and the bugs, which you could tie in like bugs like locusts to plagues to famine. If she's like actually Lolan and she's tied to the house and like famine's an issue with her country, you can do a lot of things with a bug motif. I'm really curious to see what we do with Shisui and possibly Lolan later on. Vero-chan8046 with episode 10 says, speaking of Shisui, her story was absolutely terrifying. Definitely the scariest by far. And I'm sure it contains a lot of symbolism and metaphors related to Shisui herself. Case in point, the insect thing was too much of a coincidence to not point to her in some way. And so I wondered if maybe, before I read the rest of Vero-chan's comments, I wondered if it maybe, you know, related to Jinshi, because Jinshi was like the priest or leader of the ceremony in the last season when he was targeted. And that was right about the time that Lolan showed up. So I don't know. But then they said, furthermore, I couldn't help but notice that just like Suirei, the woman who is supposed to be dead in the story is actually alive. And her assassination attempt was thwarted by Maomao, just like with Suirei and her attempt against Jinshi in season 1. Now, we think that it was Suirei going against Jinshi. We think that it is. We don't know for sure, unless that's a spoiler, but we don't know for sure that it was Suirei going against Jinshi. We just think that it was. Again, we're just pointing the evidence that we have available. So I don't know. I personally feel in my heart there is a connection. I think that Suirei is the daughter of the woman that was in episode 10. That's my theory. But I think that there is a connection between Suirei and Shisui and Lolin and all of this, but it's not been made clear to us, and we need more pieces of the puzzle. But I think there's a connection, and I'm excited to see what the show is going to give us in terms of that connection. So we'll just have to see. Now, Najee with episode 11 had a comment, and Be Happy, who is the moderator of this series, tagged on something with that. So I'm going to read Naj's comment first. They said, yes, all the food was invigorating, as Maomao said, aka aphrodisiacs, which we talked about last week. That's why Jinshi would not eat it, and why Basin had a nosebleed. Now, I figured Jinshi wasn't eating the food because it possibly could be an aphrodisiac. And I know HBanana7 commented about this as well. I know that the trope in anime is to have a nosebleed when you're aroused. I did not make that connection to that's why Basin had the nosebleed, because he was aroused. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's why they weren't worried about him. So it's why he was also hunched over as he tried to get to his room. Well, Jinshi is wearing a mask, though, because some of the guests, Shisho, who is Lolin's dad included, has seen him as Jinshi. That makes so much sense. I was like, oh yeah, I forget that Shisho would have seen Jinshi as the eunuch and would have been like, wow, you're the brother of the emperor and a eunuch? What a coinkydink. So that makes much more sense. But also, as the imperial brother, they can't let them make that connection. In the novels, the excuse is that the imperial brother has facial scars, and that's why he wears a mask. And I was like, oh, this is the first time it's been brought up. And so Be Happy said, I want to add something to Naj's comment on episode 11. The imperial brother hides his face due to rumors that there are burning scars in his face, so his facade as Jinshi won't blow up. I believe it was mentioned in several comments and the Discord around the time of episode 12 in season 1, when Aduo left the palace to explain how Jinshi as the imperial brother wasn't recognized. The subject has come on episode 5 during the garden party, when the imperial brother was supposed to show up but didn't. And then by episode 12, the question was, well, how is he supposed to attend if he is the imperial brother? That must have been seen it by at least some people. Thus, the explanation that was brought up in the light novel and the manga around those specific chapters is that he sports a mask to hide his supposed burning scars. That is fascinating to me. That explains a lot. So I'm very thankful that you all waited till we got to this point before talking about it, because I was just like, yeah, I remember back in season 1, I'm like, how do they know that Jinshi is here, but he's also supposed to be imperial brother? Surely somebody's noticed the resemblance. But he wears a mask as the imperial brother because he has burning scars. I'm curious how they explained those burning scars and how that came about. But he's the imperial brother, so I guess nobody questions, right? Nobody's going to question about it. But that makes a lot of sense. So the problem is, if Shisho sees Jinshi there, he's going to know that something is amiss and something's up. Well, that just added a bunch of stakes to this. That just added a lot of stakes to this, actually. So, okay, welp. Oh, no. So, thank you so much for the comments. That's definitely a lot of, no pun intended, food for thought. But I'm going to be honest with y'all. I've had to do a bunch of stuff this morning, so it's taken me till this afternoon to get around to this episode. And now I'm really excited. I've waited all week, so we need to get started with it. Okay, I'm so excited. Anyway, we're not going to waste any more time. We are going to dive right in to episode 12 of season 2 of the Apothecary Diaries. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh, y'all, I had to cut off the credits, the end credits, because my internet was just not working. It cut out 3 times during this episode, and I was like, why? It worked perfect this morning. Why is it being weird now? Why can't we have nice things? Hashtag rule problems, but it's fine. Luckily, it didn't cut out at a point where it was like, you know, like when Jinshi has Maomao on the ground. So, okay. So ZUIGETSU is Jinshi's actual name, is his imperial name. But they also call him the Moon Prince, but we know him as Jinshi. I'm like Maomao. You're Jinshi to me, Jinshi. So that's interesting. So Ka means flower, and that makes sense why nobody speaks the emperor's names, because they're the only names that have flower in them, and it's kind of taboo to say the emperor's names. It also makes sense because the flowers have been tied back to the royal mother. In the OP, we saw the other emperor with the flowers around him, like he was kind of like afraid of that lineage and all of that. So interesting. I find it curious that we have I probably need to bring Whiteboard Coon out for this, if I'm being quite honest with you all, but I'll probably do that here in a hot second. But before we do that, I do find it interesting that you have Maomao, who is this character that's all about growing like the herbs and stuff and all of the flowers and plants to be used in medicines. And she kind of has like, I think of Maomao as having like a sun motif, because she grows things and she's this beacon of light in Jinshi's life. And then you have Jinshi, who's the moon. So that makes sense. And it's beautiful and all this. And it kind of ties to the moon fairy. All of it makes sense. The symbolism, everything, it all ties together. It's really great. So yeah. Okay. I was really happy with how this turned out. I was really worried. Maomao girl, you are in a state of denial that is so vast. And I'm like, girl, but I know why she is. And the writing is kind of on the wall of why she is. And we're going to talk about it with this episode. But I'm probably going to call him Jinshi for now as well, because Ka ZUIGETSU it feels like it's a lot. So I want to go turn the sound off on this. As we go back through the episode and talk about it. I felt for Basen a lot in this episode. Bless his heart. Lee Haku coming in clutch. Look at him. But the thing that's so crazy that I do like about this episode, that this series does very well, is the series doesn't try to wrap everything up in a nice, neat little bow during one specific episode. It leaves a lot unsaid, a lot unspoken, and a lot just kind of lingering and hanging in the air that's going to have to be addressed later. And honestly, that's really realistic, because very rarely do you, in the course of a day, figure out the culprits, the motive, the actions, the equipment that was used. Very rarely, this ain't no true crimes where you figure the whole thing out in a day. Usually stuff like this takes months, even years to wrap up entirely. Not that they have years, but I do appreciate that Maomao and Jinshi and them, they didn't just solve the case in this episode. It's ongoing, and it's adding to the overarching string of questions that Maomao has concerning everything. And I think it's very smart from a narrative standpoint from the writer of the series, because then you leave kind of threads kind of hanging that you're going to wrap up and solve later on and add to and complicate even further. Because there's stuff from season 1 that we never got resolved. Suirei, case in point. There's stuff from season 1 that's still kind of hanging in the air that like, we never really got an explanation for that. And that's really nice for a writer, because then you can always go back and draw from those unresolved plot threads and tie them into the current ones. And you can do a lot with that. So I'm interested in this whole scene that we start with. Poor Basen. Basen is stuck between a rock and a hard place. Basen is young. He's 19. He's impetuous. And he does not like all the formalities that he has to do with regarding Jinshi. Gaoshun is 36. He's my age. Gaoshun knows, since he's been working with the imperial family for like 20 years, or since he was a kid, he knows how this goes, and he knows the stakes. He knows the part he has to play. Like, he, in this episode, as we find out, is Jinshi's surrogate. He's just there to take the place of Jinshi as like the head eunuch. And everybody there at the party knows him as part of the Ma clan, but no, they believe that he's become a eunuch for the sake of the clan, when we all know that no, he hasn't become a eunuch. He's just taking the medicine like Jinshi is. He can go back to helping make his wife happy anytime he wants. But he is. And so he's just, and Gaoshun is so chill. Like, there were moments in that one guy's conversation that Gaoshun, poker face. I would not play poker against Gaoshun. I would probably lose. Unless you're Maomao, because Gaoshun's just like this with Maomao. He's like, oh my God. So, but Basen, as Gaoshun says, has a long way to go. He's very impatient. He was like trying to figure out what was going on. He was just kind of out of the loop. And I love Lee Haku, our sweet himbo. He just helped out Maomao. It was so awesome. I loved it. He's a little angel baby. So Boston's trying to figure out what was said. Why did he roles that are pure formalities? He's like, I hate just sitting here doing nothing. But here's the thing. Shisho seems like he doesn't really know what's going on, and he's kind of like, I don't know how to handle this. He seems like he doesn't want to wrap up the party. He seems pretty much like trying to figure out what to do. And Boston notes that there's no way to tell what he's thinking. Well, Lowland's not far from the family tree. They're kind of hard to figure out. I can't decide in this episode what Shisho's role is. To me, this is all, of course, based on pure conjecture. I feel as if Shisho did organize this, but it all went south, and so he's distancing himself from it as far as possible to be like, well, that was a botched plan, never mind, and then just to kind of avoid it. I don't know, though. The way that Boston talks, he could still be innocent, and this could be a third party. Or is this that did Shisho know that like the envoys or someone sent assassins, and he was just casually turning a blind eye to be like, oh, you guys want to assassinate the Imperial Prince? Okay, cool. I'm going to look this way. You guys do what you need to do, and I'll just sit here and drink my drink, and you tell me when it's done. So it could be something like that, where he's not directly involved, but he is aware of the people that are involved, and so they're just using his facility, which is a pretty big gamble if that's the case, because if that implicates you in an assassination attempt against the royal family. But I don't know. The fact that he has been friends of the family should say something, but I don't know what to make of him. He is very mysterious this episode. We don't get answers, and it's kind of annoying. But Boston says he wouldn't want trouble taking place at his own party, but that is the point. They had Jinshi go away during the hunt. Then it's not technically at your party, because it's technically where he was shot at was a ways away. And Boston's like, does he have nothing to do with this? Well, I don't know about this. So, allegory of a cave, huh? Let's go in the cave here as we go back to Maomao and Jinshi. And Maomao's like, oh, hey, how's it going? At this point, Jinshi he's enamored, in love with Maomao. There's no stopping that. I don't think that's about to change. One thing, though, is that I like about this is that Maomao, as we've come to find out, not only in this episode, but the entire series, she does not pick up a lot of times on she's good at picking up some subtle cues, but Maomao has a little bit of neurodivergence herself, where she picks up on some social cues, but others, as we've learned from this episode and from the prior episodes, just kind of skate over her head. And we can call it a state of denial, but I kind of know why she doesn't want to think too much on it, because the thing about it is, Maomao kind of has it nice right now. She has her own shed. She has access to the medicines and the goods. She has the protection of Jinshi and Gaoshun and the Imperial Palace. She's on the Emperor and the Empress's good side. She has her friends Xiaolon and Shisui. She gets to work with Gyokyo and see Lingli. Like, Maomao has it pretty good. She can't see her dad, which sucks. But all things considered, especially how she started in season 1, she's got it good. And she knows from working in the brothels how hard for a woman it can be. So she's like, I can't complain. But as Maomao has talked about in season 1, especially towards the beginning of the season, she knows how precarious her situation is. Granted, Maomao believes and underestimates herself and devalues herself a lot. She thinks that she's just a servant girl and she's expendable. We as the audience know, girl, you need a little more self-esteem. You are not expendable. People are starting to rely upon you and are thinking you're very useful. So you're not exactly expendable. Although Gaoshun does bring up, he's like, it's cold to think about it, but he's like, we need her. She's useful to us. And he kind of like, he's like, we kind of have to view her as a pawn because we may have to use her. And I feel like what Gaoshun says at the end of the episode is going to come in conflict with Jinshi at some point and is going to have to be something to be addressed. Because the way Gaoshun kind of talks about it at the end of the episode, he's like, Maomao's useful. She's smart. She can help us figure out things. We may have to put her in danger in the future to benefit us. and to keep Jinshi and the family line safe. And I feel that's going to come in direct contrast with what Jinshi wants, because the Empress has told Jinshi, if you love something, don't put it out there in danger because you may lose it. And so I feel like there's going to be this shift and this rift between Gao Xun being like, we need to use her skills to help us solve the problems, and Jinshi being like, well, yeah, but if it puts her in danger, I love her. I don't know if I want to do that. And there's going to be some tension there. And what do we do with that? Well, we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it. But I can understand why Maomao doesn't want to know what Jinshi is telling her, because she's like, if I get further implicated, she's like, what you're about to tell me, if you tell me you are the Emperor's brother, she's like, I'm a part of this circle now. And it's like a mafia situation. She's like, once I know this information, I can't tell anyone or I could die and be beheaded. I don't want to lose my head over information that I'm not ready to hear. So she tries to not hear what he's saying. She's like, nope, I don't want to know you're the Imperial brother. I don't want to say this. Nope, I don't want to know this thing, because then I can't go back. She's like, she's like, what happens if I can't go stay with my dad anymore or see him again because I know too much? So I get where Maomao is coming from, not wanting to know that information. It's just frustrating for us, the audience, because we're like, girl, everybody else knows. You need to know. And when I say everybody else, I'm like Gao Xun and Basin and all this. But I definitely view Maomao as demisexual. Or on the asexual spectrum. She's at best demisexual. Like maybe for Jinshi she would, but I think otherwise she's not really interested in that sort of thing. Whereas Jinshi, head over heels, all in for her. But girl has her hand on his dick. Can we just say on his frog? On his frog! The frog motif is hilarious. I love she calls it a frog. You know what? She wasn't being totally crass and totally mean to him. She said a somewhat large frog. She could have said it was small, but she has her hand right on his dick and is like, what is this? And Jinshi's like, poor Jinshi. She's like, oh, it seems too big for a frog. Girl. He's like, could you please move your hand? It's touching me in a place that I really don't want to be touched right now. And that's when she realizes, oh, shit. She's like, oh, huh. Jinshi's reactions during all of this, girls, gentlemen, ladies. She's like, it can't be what a eunuch has prior to entering the palace, but it is. I mean, little did we know that Maomao would be getting CPR and Jinshi would be getting an unintentional hand job in this episode. And then finally he's like, oh, thank God she removed her hands. And she says his build is unlike that of a normal eunuch. She's like, there were so many other hints, but I might have been subconsciously avoiding the thought of it because it's self-preservation. She knows she doesn't want to get too deep in. But Master Jinshi he is a man. I do think somebody pointed out his hair, and I was like, his bangs are a little bit side parted here, but I don't mind it. I like it. And Jinshi's like, well, the good news is I don't have to explain to you that I'm not a eunuch anymore. He's like, you know I'm not a eunuch, so... And then he's like, I need to tell you something. But Maomao's like, I don't want to hear because... She's like, I don't want to listen because if you tell me this and implicate me in all of this, I'll have to take it to my grave. She's like, I'll have to keep a secret. Maomao's like, I don't want to keep a secret. And I don't blame her in a sense, because I'm like, if she has to keep this secret that's so important she could die over it, that's a big responsibility. But on the other hand, I'm like, girl, you need to know who he is. Now, the big question next episode is, or going further the next episode is, she knows now that Jinshi's not a eunuch. So is she going to ask about that? Is she going to... The end of the episode kind of makes it seem like she's not going to ask about it, and she's just going to be like, fine, he's not a eunuch. But if he wants to pretend to be a eunuch, I'm sure he has a very good reason. And I'm like, ah! So, sure, girl. Okay. And then I like that Jinshi can't say her name. He has to say apothecary. And she says, oh, my apologies. I might have crushed a frog. It certainly wasn't your penis. And she's like, I must have fell and lost my balance. Are you hurt? And he's like, no, that wasn't a frog. And she's like, yes, it was a frog. And he's like, and Jinshi's getting frustrated because he's like, who are you calling a frog? I love that Jinshi gets mad because I don't blame him. And she's like, well, what else could it have been? He says, well, frogs are smaller, aren't they? And she says, well, there are lots of somewhat large frogs in this time of year. Now, granted, he's getting mad because he's trying to tell her something important, and she's throwing him off and not wanting to listen. And she does taunt him with the somewhat large frog. She does taunt him with that because he's like, what do you mean somewhat? Like, she does tease him about that. And I don't blame him for getting mad in that moment. She's like, what other somewhat large thing could it be? Like, I love them getting kind of riled up at each other, which is great. And she's like, well, frogs are pretty gross. They get all slimy, you know. And Jinshi's like, if you tell me that you're attracted to Shisui, I'm going to have it out. So he's like, who are you calling slimy? And she's like, I don't know anything. And Jinshi, in that moment, she says, I can't know too much. Master Jinshi and I are an official and his servant. Nothing more, nothing less. Yeah, I feel like Maomao loves the comfort of where she's at in this relationship. She's comfortable being just his servant. She's like, I'm comfortable being his employee. Nothing more. We don't need an office romance. But I'm like, girl, it's too late for that. I'm like, not only have you saved his life and impressed his parents and his grandmother, you basically, you're beyond just office mates. Nope. That's too late for that. And I think that she's afraid that if it goes to a different level, things could change for worse. Like, she might end up getting separated from him, or she might not be able to go back and see her dad. Like, I get why Maomao is doing the things that she's doing. I don't like change, and I like being comfortable, so I get that. But at this point, Gao Shun has pointed out by the end of the episode, he's like, we can't keep this up for long. If the emperor doesn't have a male heir and something happens to him, Jinshi's going to have to be ready to become the emperor, and we can't just ignore that forever, or it could be a problem. And, you know, Jinshi is being the eunuch, so he's taking all these drugs that could affect his fertility. So if he does end up becoming the emperor, then, like, how is he going to have kids? What if that's affected? What's that going to do with Maomao? So in Gao Shun's perfect world, he's probably like, I would love Jinshi to tell Maomao and for her and him to end up together. Perfect world scenario. But he's like, we can't, that's not going to happen anytime soon. And we can't wait around and be comfortable when there are people trying to take Jinshi's life and possibly the life of the consorts and the emperor himself. So Gao Shun's like, we need to kind of get prepared for shit to go down and to be ready for that. And she's like, there's no need to share any unnecessary secrets. Maomao just doesn't want to know too much. She doesn't want to have to share secrets and make it awkward. And also, Maomao probably doesn't want things to get awkward between her and Jinshi. She likes where they are. There's a little bit of distance, but they're able to be close. But Jinshi's like, no, that's not how this works. He is remarkably soft when he puts her down on the ground, though. He grabbed her waist and her head to keep her from getting hurt. He was very soft. But he stands over her being like, look, I don't know how to make this clearer to you, but I'm a man. And do you want to find out if I'm a eunuch or not? He's like, because I'm a eunuch. It's not a damn frog. And in that moment, Jinshi's like, look, you keep throwing me off and ignoring the fact that I'm a man and I'm not a eunuch. So do I need to show you? Is this how you want to find out? Or are you going to listen to me and believe me? I'm like, ooh. Because she looks so uncomfortable in this moment when he's like holding her like that. And she's like, shit, I provoked him too much. And he's clearly mad at her in that moment. And she's like, what do I do? Here's the thing. She's like, should I kick him? But she's like, I don't know. I don't want to hurt him. Now, I am glad, actually, that he did not kiss her in this moment, because she was not in the right place for a kiss. It's kind of like the CPR thing. She was bracing herself for it, and she wasn't fighting back necessarily, but I'm glad they didn't end up kissing, even if it was consensual, because she clearly was not in the mood for it. And she was kind of like, okay, I'm not going to fight back because I don't want to hurt him, but I'm also not ready for this. Here's my thing. If Jinshi and Maomao kiss, I want Maomao to initiate it. And I feel like Maomao needs to initiate it. Because we all know as the audience, Jinshi loves her. He would go to the grave for her. To the point where Gao Shun's probably concerned. But we all know Jinshi would kiss her anytime, and it's mutual on his part. But we as the audience need to see that it's mutual on Maomao's part, and that's why this is a damn slow burn, because it's going to take forever for her to get to that point. But it needs to be Maomao. I get very much Bloom Into You vibes from these two in this episode. If you've not watched Bloom Into You, you should. It's really good. But it is a Yuri. It is these two girls in a relationship. But Maomao gives me a lot of vibes like you in that series. And without spoiling anything, you does not believe that she is worthy of love in that series. And you find this out very early on, like first chapter. She doesn't think that she's worthy of love, and she believes she's kind of asexual, and she doesn't believe that she can ever have love the way that others have love. And Maomao is very similar. Maomao, growing up in the brothels, believes that love is transactional, and she doesn't believe that she's, would deserve it. And she believes that she lost all the ability to love from her mother's womb. And with the whole thing about her crying in this episode kind of emphasizes that as well. And we'll talk about it when we get to it. But she doesn't believe that she deserves that kind of relationship. But in Bloom Into You, Yu's character meets someone that's kind of like Jinshi in a lot of ways, actually. And their relationship kind of has to develop to where they're both on the same page. And I feel like it's going to take Maomao a long time, but she's going to have to slowly work out these feelings and figure out what she thinks of Jinshi and if she feels that same way about him, and then they have to move forward from there. So we'll have to see if that ends up happening or not. But yeah, so thank God Lee Haku's dog comes down. And I love that Maomao gives him a hug, like, thank you for coming down here and preventing this sexual encounter from happening that I wasn't ready for. Poor Jinshi. Jinshi getting the scraps. Jinshi getting the scraps from an Ox Bezor. Jinshi getting the scraps from Lee Haku. What can he do? Poor boy. He's literally the Imperial Prince getting denied. What can he do? But yeah, I love that Maomao's like, oh, thank goodness you're here. And she's like, oh, it's Lee Haku. Her voice was so raspy when she called out his name. And Jinshi's like, son of a bitch. He's like, I didn't get a chance to tell her. I feel bad for Jinshi because he's like, I needed to tell her who I am. And now, not only did she insult my penis, but she also denied my advances. He's like, I'm glad that they had that talk at the end, because I think that cleared up some things for Jinshi, because I worried in this first part if Jinshi was mad and there was the miscommunication trope where he was like, well, does she not even like me? And I'm like, well, Jinshi, she don't really like anybody. You just gotta, you gotta read between the lines, sir. But good on Lee Haku for being a sweetheart. I love it. So they talk about the guns that they were being used for the assassination attempt, and Maomao does her Sherlock duties and finds out about the dog and what he can do. And she's like, okay, well, let's plan this out. And then, of course, when she looks over to Jinshi, he's mad in the moment because he's like, what now? I love that he shows how immature he is. He's like, what now? What? And she's like, well, shit. She's like, well, here we go. She's like, let's solve the case first. I do like that Maomao admits that she's like, I got carried away taunting him like that, so he has every right to be mad at me. He was trying to tell me something, but I made up some crazy excuses to avoid hearing him out. And so I like Maomao goes through the motions of realizing, I wish Jinshi could read her mind to know that she is sorry for what she did. And they do apologize at the end, so that at least there's that. But she says he does take pride in his appearance, and I kind of insulted him a little bit. And when she said, I bet his frog's quite impressive. Girl. When she says, oh, it's not like I'll ever see it. And we, the audience, are like, we hope you will. We hope you will at some point. Maybe, possibly, down the road. 5 seasons from now. So, she's like, I do also like that Maomao's like, I know things are awkward, but we need to get through this. So she tells Jinshi, like, we need to find a way to work through this. I love that Lee Haku gets Boston onto this search and gets him into the plan. Boston was trying to get up to everybody's speed, but Lee Haku is like the perfect messenger. He just does it with a smile, and he's like, here you go. Like, I love Lee Haku. He's such a sweetheart. I love him in this. And of course, Gao Shun can't get involved. He has to just sit there and get crunk. But now it makes sense why they wouldn't let the dog on the hunt, which is curious because makes it feel like the dog was with their group. So is it an inside job? Because it's their dog they wouldn't let on the hunt? Curious. The moment that dog growled around him, I'm like, it's him. Dogs don't lie. I do like the fact that they used the arrows, though, because it wasn't arrows that was shot at them. It was the FIFA that shot at them. So I like that they used an arrow as a way to convince Boston and the others who were not in the know to search everybody's equipment. Like, you couldn't just come out and say search, but this allowed them to do it where it wasn't weird. And then they went out in the woods and the guy got freaked out. And then that's when they found the gun. I just love Maomao was like looking for this. And she's like, that dog doesn't like you, so you're clearly the bad guy. I love Jinshi standing up next to him. I thought he was going to kick him, but he did not. So then they talk about the gun and how it's clearly from the West and it's not like they've seen before. And Maomao traces back the smell of the gunpowder to what she smelled when they were on the cliff. Interesting. She's like, I feel bad for the man that we had to use as bait. And then I like that Maomao says Master Kosen, which now Kosen and Ka ZUIGETSU. And so Boston's like, are you hurt? Poor Boston. He's not in the know. Bless his heart. So they have an eye on the associates, and all we have to do is make their crime clear. But then when Jinshi walks past her and he leaves, there is a sad moment here because he's like on duty. Like at this point, Jinshi is acting as the Imperial Prince, getting jobs done, going back to doing his duty, and he can't afford to like talk to her right now or be Jinshi around her. He has to be the Imperial Prince. And there's a part of me that thinks that Maomao kind of knows who he is, but again, she's in denial. But then there's another part of me after this episode that's like, well, no, maybe she's kind of neurodivergent and she doesn't get it. Maybe she doesn't. Maybe it doesn't click to her. She doesn't know what to think about it. But I think maybe it works to her advantage that she doesn't. It did feel a little bit sad that she was kind of left behind them at the end of this scene. But then there's another part of me that's like, if she's not really on the up and up of what's going on, maybe she didn't look too into that and seem like he was ignoring her. But I do feel that there's a little moment here where he walks past her as the Imperial Prince that is kind of something that could be a boundary for them later, where right now it's all cozy and they can be apothecary and eunuch solving all the crimes and doing the stuff in the palace. If he were to have to take the mantle of being the Imperial Prince, he wouldn't be able to go gallivanting around with Maomao anymore, solving crimes or solving mysteries, and she probably wouldn't see him as much anymore. And if she did, she wouldn't be able to like rib him and joke with him in the same capacity that she does now. So there's a sadness to it. And I kind of don't want Jinshi to be the emperor. I want them to have a male heir that can take the emperor's place and Jinshi can go off and do the fun things with Maomao. But there is in the back of our mind now this situation that she might get left behind while he goes and does his imperial duties. And how does she feel about that? What does that mean for our duo? I don't know. So it says, after that, the masked guests returned to the mountain resort. And from there, the after party of the hunt wrapped up. And then they have all these little like mini boats that are like party. It's like the after party. And Gaoshun, meanwhile, has just been sitting there getting drunk the whole time. Or not drinking. Or just pretending to drink. And so they talk about it. And say the disappearance during the day was written off as the masked lord's whimsy. And you know what? Considering how kind of messed up his grandpa was, I could see that. I could see them being like, oh, you know, his family's kind of crazy sometimes. Don't mind him. I could see that. And so there's these men here that they've apprehended. It became public knowledge that during the party, a certain official and his party disappeared. Oh, so these guys took them away and they'll never be seen in public again. Basically, that was a mob job of like, whether they're going to be imprisoned or we don't get to know. That's the thing. Maomao kind of goes over, or Gaoshun's the one narrating at this point. But that's kind of the scary thing is we don't know if those guys were killed or interrogated and imprisoned. We don't get to know that knowledge. We just know that they're never going to be seen again. For the assassination attempt. Interesting. And Gao Shun's like, man, he seems tired. And I'm like, oh, when you find out what happened, Gao Shun, you're going to bash your head up against a board. Since I'm here as a surrogate for Master Jinshi, I'm not in the position to worry about that. There is something about Gao Shun's monologue here that reminds me of Maomao, where both Gao Shun and Maomao kind of know their position and their rank and what their purpose is in this world that they live in. And so it's one of those things where you know that Maomao and Gao Shun are probably going to find out later, but in the moment they take their duty seriously and they don't question it, which is a kind of cool trait between the two of them. I love he looks over at his son. He's like, he's got a long way to go. Poor Boston. I feel for him. So then this guy shows up, this drunk guy, that says, was the entertainment not enjoyable for a eunuch? And Gao Shun's like, oh no, I'm enjoying myself. My thing is, if these people know that Gao Shun is a eunuch now, do they know that he's married and has a child? Maybe they don't know that Boston's his son, and they just assume he's just like a eunuch from the family that, you know, doesn't have a wife and kid. Because I'm like, I'm pretty sure Gao Shun's got more action than you, sir. And so he's like, oh, it must be terrible being forced to become a eunuch because you angered the empress. So that's the story. Okay. And Gao Shun's like, oh, well, that's in the past. That lie is not relevant anymore. He says, this drink suits the moon very well. Interesting. I love that kind of veiled comment there. He's like, I became a eunuch and discarded the Ma name and changed it to Gao Shun. So I guess maybe they don't know that he is. But he says at parties, I'm treated as one of the Ma family. So interesting. I like that when he's there, he's treated as his old family, even if he's not supposed to be. He's like, so that's how it is. And I like that Gao Shun kind of accepts how he's treated, despite the fact that it's kind of disaligned with the rest of his world. It reminds me a lot of Maomao, because Maomao is Locken's daughter, but she's not exactly treated like Locken's daughter, and that's just how it is. So it's interesting, the parallels. And so the one guy's like, oh, it's a shame that Jinshi couldn't join the hunt. And he's like, no, the masked lord is with us this time. And he says, if that beautiful face joined us, then what does he say there? It would be an insult to our lord. Yeah, Jinshi's a lot more impressive than Shisho. I heard, now at this part here, I heard the masked lord has a burn scar on his face. If I would have found out this episode. I know people in the comments, they want to tell me ahead of time so I understand the context, but it's so weird because I don't know if maybe they tell you all earlier in the novel, but it's like they were going to tell me in this episode, so I would have found out. So I don't know what to make of that, but it's fine. And he's always locked away in his room. The emperor must be worried to have that as the crown prince. So basically these people are insulting, and Gao Shun's like, yes. And Gao Shun's like, ooh, that, huh? No respect at all for the crown prince. So that's a problem, because Gao Shun's kind of realizing that we're sort of in an impasse. On the one hand, the emperor is letting Jinshi go around being the head eunuch so that he can detect, problems like people trying to poison his consorts and things against the imperial palace taking place. So you have this weird dynamic. You have, on the one hand, you kind of need Jinshi because he's, helping to figure out and make sure that the consorts are safe and doing what the emperor can't do behind the scenes. But then on the other hand, the problem is, because Jinshi's doing all this, you never see the imperial prince. And so everybody in the surrounding kingdoms thinks that the imperial prince is weak. So their thoughts are, if something happens to the emperor or his consorts and there's no other heir, then it's going to be real easy to take over that kingdom because the emperor that's going to be in charge is going to be weak. And that's a problem. And Gao Shun's kind of like, shit, we're kind of in between a rock and a hard place, right? Because you need to have, it's one of those things where Jinshi sort of needs to be more present as the imperial prince to build up his reputation. But then if he's doing that, he can't be Jinshi. So where do we find balance with that? And what do we do? And he's like, well, after the tragedy earlier, have any of the concubines come to be with child? And Gao Shun's like, I don't know. I'm not going to tell you that. They're fishing for gossip to find out. Because everybody's wondering, is the emperor going to have an heir Or is Jinshi going to be the next one in line for the throne? And he's like, everyone is trying to determine if the main guest of this hunting party, that is the emperor's younger brother, is fit to take over the throne. That is a problem. That's going to be something they have to deal with later on. Was Master Jinshi able to tell Xiao Mao the truth? It's like, well, halfway. It's like the half moon in the sky. We got halfway there. We didn't get there all the way. But he's like, she needs to know in order to deal with the problems that could take place in the near future. She really is that useful. And I agree with Gao Shun. He's like, there's been an assassination attempt. There's been people trying to poison the consorts. In the future, there's going to be some trying times ahead where Jinshi is going to be put to the task, and Mao Mao needs to be on the same page if she's going to help them. And Gao Shun's like, this is really cold to say, but while she's a pawn with us, she is useful, and we need all the useful pawns we can get. So Gao Shun, I think that Jinshi's going to say that she's more than a pawn. And Gao Shun's going to be like, uh-oh. So we'll see how that goes. Meanwhile, Mao Mao's back at the palace after getting out of her robes and everything. And she's looking out the window saying another uncomfortable ending. Now, for her, it's not uncomfortable between her and Jinshi necessarily, but it's the fact that just like the other time, and we see Sui Rei walking away. We see her walking away into the shadows of the night. She says, just like that other time, with her, there's so much left unanswered. Like where they got the FIFA, or who's involved, or what they really wanted, and so on. Mao Mao's like, I don't like to end things without it all being explained. And I'm with Mao Mao. We did not get hardly anything explained at all. We found out practically nothing this episode, which is not what I expected and very frustrating. Foreign made, most likely a model from the West. So Mao Mao says, well, the West, where the envoys are from, who were almost mirror images of one another. The story about the girls sneaking out and tricking their guards was probably about them. And yes, so we deduced that back in the early part of the season, but Mao Mao is now catching up to speed, right? So then she's like, well, what were they doing sneaking out like that? Why are they sneaking out with the guards? Was it like the metaphor of the younger sister becoming with child? Or were they after a man? Or maybe. So she brings up the idea, and again, this is all Mao Mao's conjecture. It does not mean that it's right, but she brings up the idea that what if she was giving the guns from the West to someone they were meeting up with? Now, I find it interesting that we just introduced last episode, in episode 10, 3 new maids, and we have 3 FIFAs. That's curious to me. I think it feels like a coincidence, but it could be something more. I don't know. Maybe it's just coincidence with the numbers. It's curious. I wonder if, based on what Mao Mao is saying here, if the envoy, one of the sisters, because she was sneaking out in that one episode and the other one stayed behind after the Moon Fairy episode and was like, okay. What if the one sister took the FIFAs, snuck out, met with Shisho, and said, here, give these to your men or the men you want to have do it, and they can assassinate Jinshi, and that will leave it open to where there are no other heirs except for the child of... Because here's the thing. The Emperor is not having anything to do with Lolan. Nothing. Because he's like, you're not my type. So if that is the case, then maybe Shisho's like, we need to get rid of all other possible angles that would prevent Lolan from taking the role as Empress. So your people that are in the way primarily are Jinshi. Jinshi is the heir to the throne besides the Emperor. So Jinshi's the main guy to get taken out. Then you have Li Hua and Gyokyo and Li Shu. Li Shu's not so much of a problem. And luckily, I don't think Li Shu's in a lot of danger right now because she's nowhere near what the Emperor wants to be with, thankfully. And nobody's looking to her to have the heir anytime soon. Right? But Li Shu being targeted, which we've seen through Shin, and somebody's been teaching Shin how to use the poisons. So that could tie back to That could tie back to Sui Rei if we really think about it, or the envoys, who knows. But besides that, we also have Gyokyo, who's been in danger from being poisoned several times already, and then you have Jinshi. So if Shisho is trying to take out the 3 people that are the direct hurdles to gaining the title of Empress for Lowland, then it's very reasonable to assume that the envoy could have gave these guns to Shisho to give to these men to use. So we'll see. But Maomao's like, that's all conjecture. She's like, I hope the culprits can tell us something. Well, they're probably dead by now. But she's like, maybe we'll figure it out probably. So then Jinshi comes to the door. Now, Maomao being all like, oh no, I don't want to talk to Jinshi right now. Girl. She's like a girl with a crush that doesn't even realize it. She's like, wasn't he supposed to be at the party? Why is he here? And so she goes to the door, but she doesn't open it. And she's thinking about what to say. And he's like, well, you don't have to open the door. I just want to talk to you. I'm glad that Jinshi apologizes to her, saying, he's like, I'm sorry I startled you so much. I love him. I love he taps his foot, which is a nervous habit that he has. When he taps his hand or his feet, he's nervous. And he's like rubbing his hair. And he's like, I like that he apologizes to her because he did put her in a very compromising position. And as far as he thinks, he might think that that was uncomfortable for her and that she like was off put by that, which is not totally untrue. But he's apologizing, so that's good. And she's like, I may not be able to see him, but I know the face he's making. Girl, for someone that doesn't think you pick up on cues, you pick up on a lot with Jinshi, and you just don't want to admit it. Mm-hmm. And she says, I don't mind. In fact, I'm the one who should apologize. I like that she says that, and for her, she's like calling it somewhat large and all. I like that she apologized to him too, because she recognizes she taunted him. And then she's like, what is Master Jinshi thinking? I've always been slow when it comes to understanding human feelings. I felt really bad with this flashback where she's a kid and she talks about being at the brothel and all the other concubines had to be like getting ready and doing their job, and they just left her to cry until they were done with work. And so they just left her, and she's like, I heard it didn't take long for me to learn to stop crying. Which she has cried before in this series, right? I think she has. She has cried before, right? I feel like she has. But I feel so bad that little baby Maomao was like left to just not cry anymore. Like, that's really sad. And so then she says, that's probably why I'm slow to notice how they feel about me, good or bad. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that during her development, that had a big impact, right? It probably had a big effect over how she reacted to things, because she's like, if nobody paid any attention to her or gave her a signal as a kid of, oh, this is good or oh, this is bad, she wouldn't know. So now it's affected her as an adult, where she's like, I don't really know the cue, the social cue. Like, am I supposed to be happy? Are you sad? Are you mad at me? Everybody's just ignored me, so I don't know. And that's really sad. I felt really bad for her in that scene. And so she's like, I have no idea what to say in these situations, which is really sad. And she's like, I won't breathe a word of it. Now, she says here she's not going to tell anybody that he's not a eunuch. And Jinshi's like, oh, okay. Because Jinshi's like, I mean, that is a form of trust. If she's like, I'll keep your secret. I won't say that you're not a eunuch. I'll keep it a secret. I'll treat you as we have been treated this whole time, despite it. And I love the back-to-back where it's just the two of them and the doors in between them. And she says, no matter what, you will always be Master Jinshi to me. I love that, because to him, that's what he wants to hear in a way, because I feel like Jinshi was afraid that now Jinshi may unfortunately think that she's put two and two together, that he's the Imperial Prince. And I'm a little worried about that, because if he assumes that she knows that he's the prince and she's just not going to say anything and just consider to keep calling him Jinshi, then something might come out later and she's like, wait, what? You're the prince? And he's like, oh my God. But I mean, why else would she say you're always going to be Jinshi to me? Except She may just be thinking that. She's like, you know, if you're not a eunuch, that's fine. But I'm going to keep calling you Jinshi because that's who I know you as. And I think to me, that's what Jinshi wants, because all these people around him, they tug him in all these different directions. There's people that are on there's people that have ties with the royal family that want to view Jinshi as the heir to the throne, and they're tugging him this way. And then there's people that put the consorts in danger, so he has to be Jinshi the eunuch, and they tug him this way. Then there's his papa bro that's tugging him one way, and then there's all of these thoughts of like, what's the future going to hold for him? And so that's really scary for Jinshi. And so Jinshi just wants somebody that will unconditionally accept him for who he is. And that's literally Maomao in this moment. She's like, no matter what anybody calls you, or no matter what your title is, whether you're the head eunuch or whether you're the imperial prince or the emperor, to me, you're Jinshi. You're Jinshi-sama to me. And you're always going to be who you are now. And him smiling at that. And she's like, these are my honest feelings. And I love that she, like, has this touching moment. She's like, whether he still has his balls or not has nothing to do with me. Which it really doesn't. And then she has the audacity to say, anyway, it's not like I'm going to have, like, she says, it's not like I'm ever going to see them. Girl, you might. Girl, I think Jinshi's banking on you seeing them one day, but girl. Because again, Maomao does not think that she's good enough for him. Maomao doesn't think she's good enough to ever be with him, and she doesn't think that he likes her that way. She thinks he was just doing that with her to prove that he wasn't a eunuch. And I'm like, girl, you have no freaking idea. So again, that's why I need Maomao to be the one to realize she loves him and to be the one to be with him. I need her to recognize that, but we are not there yet, y'all. And so Jinshi says, I see. That will always be me in your view. I love him smiling there. So I'm assuming that that's a good thing. And so that's when he opens up the door and he's like, don't be alarmed. I just want to give you this, you know. And when she takes the bag, I love that their fingers touch in that moment and he like drops it because, you know, doesn't want to get too close. For the longest time, I wanted to give you this when I told you a certain something. This is like a confession gift. This is like him saying, hey, I wanted to give you something for when I told. What it also is, he's like, I wanted to give you something, you know, when I came out and told you that I'm actually, you know, that I actually have a penis. It's, you know, I'm not who this is like a smoothing over gift where he's like, I've been lying to you this whole time and I didn't want you to be mad at me. So I got you this as a gift so you wouldn't be mad at me forever. I hope that's okay. I'm sorry that I lied to you. I'm glad that you accept me despite the lie. Here's this gift. And dude, he didn't just get one. And he's like, well, it might cause trouble for you, but... And here's the problem. He was trying to tell her that he's the imperial prince. He was trying to tell her, he's like, this might cause trouble for you, but I need you to know this. But he should have told her before he gave her the gift. He's like, I brought you along on this trip for that reason. And it's too late. He should have waited to give her the ox bezors after he told her. And it's not just one. It's like 4. It's all of the ox bezors. The rarest of rare medicines that I only saw in my dreams I have in my hands. Oh my God. And that's what's from episode 12. That's the hand holding the ox bezor. And he's like, I'm sorry it took so long to find them. I finally got my hands on them. Oh my God, Jinshi. And he's like, wait, that's not what I wanted. He was like, wait, hold on. He's like, I'm supposed to be telling you I'm the prince, not talking about the ox bezors. Jinshi. And then she opens up the door and says, thank you so much. And her face... Dude, Jinshi's whipped. He's done. He was like, oh, yeah, I'm glad you're so happy. Yeah, that face, that smile, done. Jinshi's over with, done. And they look at each other, and the best part is Maomao in all of her asexual glory is like, thank you. I love how happy she is in this moment. And Jinshi's like, okay. And she's like, well, then good night. And locks the door. Like, nope, not dealing with you anymore. And he's like, wait. He's like, I'm not done talking yet. Don't close the door on me. Our poor boy. You should have waited to give her the ox bezors till afterwards. And then she's like, no one will come between us. Here's the problem, Jinshi. Jinshi, oh, you messed up, my dude. The emperor is a boobs man, and you are not a boobs man. Mao Mao is a balls man, not a frog man. Mao Mao's here for the balls, not the frog. It's not the size of the frog that matters to her. Oh, girl. And she's just like on the bed having the best time with her ox bezors. She's like, I don't care whether or not Master Jinshi is a real eunuch, but I am going to owe him for the ox bezors. If his secret got out and it gets me, if his secret gets out and it gets me into trouble, I'll have to make him a eunuch for real. I'm like, there's a part of Mao Mao that is very lock-in, and that's a very lock-in statement where she's like, if the secret gets out, I guess I'm going to have to cut his penis off. Although, him giving her the ox bezors, she owes him all the favors now. So even if she doesn't want to, even if Jinshi and Gaoshun suggest something that she's not comfortable with, like, not sexually or anything, but like, as far as jobs go, she's going to have to do it because Jinshi's going to be like, remember when I gave you the ox bezor? And she's going to be like, son of a bitch. Yes. Yes, I do. So, but if he wanted her to listen to him, he really should have waited until afterwards. He's like, I'm not finished yet. Are you listening? Bless. He's like, hey, apothecary. I'm like, too late. There are only 2 people in the land with Ka in their names. Only 2. One is the emperor at the top of the nation, and Master Jinshi, or rather the Moon Prince. You can't stay in your temporary position forever. After all, you are our emperor's younger brother, ZUIGETSU. Yikes. Now I want to know what the emperor's name is, but I'm going to wait until obviously the show tells us. Yeah, so Gaoshun's like, look, I want to retire. Me and my wife, we got plans. We're going to be going off doing crazy things. Hope that's cool and all. But he's like, I need you to figure out what we're going to do. So either Gyokyo and Li Hua need to have a son and they need to stay safe, or you need to be getting ready to possibly take that position over if something happens. So we'll just have to wait and see. I feel like Jinshi, he's been in that position for a while now, but I feel like it was only to make sure that the consorts could have a son. And since that's not happening, and I also think that Gaoshun's like, look, being a eunuch has been fun and all, but now things are getting more serious and there's attempts on your life and attempts on the imperial family. You're going to have to step away from being Jinshi for a while and become the royal prince to help solve this and put some oomph into your actions. So, I don't know. But man, that ox bezor, getting that back in this, oh, love. So yeah, this episode was really good. That was a really nice closure. We didn't get hardly any answers from the mysteries we've had, but I guess that's what the second half of the season is for. So the only unfortunate thing is I don't think I'm going to be able to see episode 13 before I leave. So I'm going to literally wait like 2 weeks before I can see this next episode. And that's so frustrating. But anyway, I am excited to hear your thoughts and comments about this episode in particular. About what you all think with Jinshi and Maomao's relationship at this point. We're halfway through season 2. So I'm curious to know your thoughts about this first cour. I really liked it. But honestly, if I'm being real with you all, I thought the second cour of season 1 was even better than the first. So I'm really excited to see what the second cour of this season will bring us. But Frog's out of the bag. At least she knows he's not really a eunuch. Although she probably will keep it a secret from everybody else. But that surely won't lead to any strange encounters or funny, unintentionally hilarious situations. I guess we'll find out. So, in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back real soon with more of the Apothecary Diaries. Bye!